I think it's very important to distinguish between facts, opinions, and beliefs. So I'm going to try very hard to be crystal clear when I am presenting facts versus stating opinion or communicating my beliefs. So let me be right up front about this. I hold 3 beliefs, which I'm going to share with you, and then spend the rest of our time showing you how I got to these beliefs. The first is that the next 20 years are going to be completely unlike the last 20 years. And why is this important? Because we tend to base our view of the future on our most recent experience. That's just part of being a human. It's also a gigantic liability at key turning points. So I say that massive change is already upon us. When I first gave this material as a talk 3 years ago, I used to say massive change is coming. Well, it's here now. That much is completely obvious. And the belief I hold is that it's really just getting underway. And I'm going to show you why I believe that. Next, I believe that it is possible that the pace and/or scope of change could overwhelm the ability of our key social and support institutions to adapt. Katrina taught us that a major U.S. city could be wiped out and pretty much remain that way for years. That is an example of major change occurring faster than our ability as a nation to respond. The types of changes I foresee in our economic landscape are much larger than Katrina. My third belief is that we do not lack any technology or understanding necessary to build ourselves a better future. Rather, we only lack the political will, which is really a reflection of the fact that we the people have not yet raised our voices in unison for real, substantive change. So the good news is that we already have everything we need, and the bad news is that we might not deploy it fast enough. Remember, these are simply my beliefs right now, and I reserve the right to change them if new information suggests that they are wrong. In the crash course, we will learn a few foundational key concepts. None are more important than exponential growth. Understanding this will greatly enhance our chances to form a better future. Here's a classic chart displaying exponential growth, a chart pattern that is often called a hockey stick. We are charting an amount of something over time. The only requirement for a graph to end up looking like this is that the thing being measured grows by some percentage over each increment of time. The slower the percentage rate of growth, the greater the length of time we need to chart in order to visually see this hockey stick shape. Another thing I want you to take away from this chart is that once an exponential function turns the corner, even though the percentage rate of growth might remain constant and possibly quite low, the amounts do not. They pile up faster and faster. In this particular case, you are looking at a chart of something that historically grew at less than 1% per year. It is world population, and because it is only growing at roughly 1% per year, we need to look at several thousands of years to detect this hockey stick shape. The green is history, and the red is the most recent UN projection of population growth for just the next 42 years. Certainly by now, math-minded folks might be getting a little uncomfortable because they might feel I'm not presenting this information in a classical or even very accurate way. Where mathematicians have been trained to define exponential growth in terms of the rate of change, we are going to focus on the amount of change. Both are valid, it's just that one way is easier to express as a formula, and the other way is easier for most people to intuitively grasp. Unlike the rate of change, the amount of change is not constant. It grows larger and larger with every passing unit of time, and that's why it's more important for us to appreciate than the rate. This is such an important concept that I will dedicate the next chapter to illustrating it. Also, Mathematicians would say that there's no turn the corner stage of an exponential chart, because this is just an artifact of where we draw the left-hand scale. That is, an exponential chart can nearly always look like a hockey stick at every moment in time, as long as we adjust the left axis properly. But if we know the limits or boundaries of what we are measuring, then we can fix the left axis, and the turn the corner stage is absolutely real and vitally important. For example, the total carrying capacity of the Earth for humans is thought to be somewhere in this zone, give or take a few billion. Because of this, the turn the corner stage is very real and not an artifact of graphical trickery. The critical takeaway for exponential functions, the one thing I want you to recall, relates to the concept of speeding up. You can think of the key feature of exponential growth either as the amount that is added growing larger over each additional unit of time, or you can think of it as the time shrinking between each additional unit of amount added. Either way, the theme is speeding up. To illustrate this using population, if we started with 1 million people and set the growth rate to a measly 1% per year, we'd find that it would take 694 years before we achieved 1 billion people. But we'd be at 2 billion people after only 100 more years, while a third billion would require just 41 more years. Then 29 years, then 22, and then finally only 18 years to add another to bring us to 6 billion people. That is, each additional billion people took a shorter and shorter amount of time to achieve. Here we can see the theme of speeding up. This next chart is of oil consumption, perhaps the most important resource of them all, which has been growing at the much faster rate of nearly 3% per year, so we can detect the hockey stick shape over the course of just 150 years. And here too, we can fix the left axis with some precision, because we know with reasonable accuracy how much oil the world can maximally produce. So again, having turned the corner is an extremely relevant and important event to us. And here's the U.S. money supply, which has been compounding at incredible rates, ranging between 5 and 18% per year. So this chart only needs to be a few decades long to see this hockey stick effect. And here's worldwide water use, species extinction, fisheries exploited, and forest cover lost. Each one of these is a finite resource, as are many other critical resources, and quite a few are approaching their limits. And here is the world you live in. If it seems like the pace of change is speeding up, well, that's because it is. You happen to live at a time when humans will finally have to confront the fact that our exponential money system and resource use will encounter hard physical limits. And behind all of this, driving every bit of every graph, is the number of people on the surface of the planet. Taken one at a time, any one of these charts could command the full attention of every earnest person on the face of the planet. But we need to understand that they are, in fact, all related and interconnected. They are all compound graphs, and they are all being driven by compounding forces. To try and solve one, you need to understand how it relates to the other ones that you see, as well as others not displayed here, because they all intersect and overlap. The fact that you live here, in the presence of multiple exponential graphs relating to everything from money to population to species extinction, has powerful implications for your life and the lives of those who will follow you. It deserves your very highest attention. Let's move on to an example that will help you better understand these graphs. Please join me for Chapter 4, compounding's the problem. Thank you for listening. Now I'm going to introduce the second key concept, and it's far enough outside of the mainstream that I'm going to get a little backup from a 19th century philosopher. Here's the quote: "All truth passes through three stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident." This great quote comes from this happy guy down in the corner. At some point over the next 20 years, this next concept I'm about to introduce will be self-evident. But for now, I think it would be safe to say that a lot of people would consider it to be ridiculous. And it centers around growth. Growth is good, right? We all want a growing economy, I guess. Why? Well, because a growing economy means that we're becoming more prosperous. Growth offers opportunities, and we're all for opportunities. At least I am. And this is the dominant story of our day. So many people would say that growth equals prosperity. But is this actually true? And what if it's not? Growth is actually a consequence of surplus, if we think about it. For example, our bodies only grow if they have a surplus of food. With an exact match between calories consumed and calories burned, a body neither gains nor loses weight. A pond only grows deeper if more water is flowing in than is flowing out, so it can be said that growth is actually dependent on surplus. Similarly, prosperity is dependent on surplus. Here's another example. Imagine that you are a family of four, your yearly income is $40,000, and at the end of the year, there is no money left. At the end of the year, there are $0 extra dollars. But then a 10% raise comes along, which equals $4,000, and your family can either afford to have one more child, or you can enjoy additional prosperity by spending a little bit more on each person. But you can't do both. There is only enough surplus money in this example to do one thing, so you have to choose. Will it be growth, or will it be additional prosperity? And what is true in this example for a family of four is equally true for a town, a state, a country, and yes, our entire world. Through this example, we can tease out a very simple and utterly profound concept, that growth does not equal prosperity. For the past few hundred years, we've been lulled into linking the two concepts because there was always sufficient surplus energy that we could have both growth and prosperity. That is, we didn't have to make any hard choices between the two. The economist Malcolm Slessor of the Resource Use Institute of Edinburgh, Scotland, has calculated that over half of the world's energy is now used to simply grow. So here's the question. What's going to happen when 100% of our surplus money or energy is being used to simply grow? The result is going to be stagnant prosperity. And what happens if there's not enough surplus to even fund growth alone? Well, when that time comes, we will experience both negative growth and negative prosperity. Not exactly the sort of future that I'm looking forward to. This, then, is the greatest challenge of our times, properly recognizing where we want our remaining surplus to go and getting that story out. I, for one, want to see continued advances in energy efficiency and medical technology and everything else that modern society can offer. This is what we place at risk if we allow ourselves to do what is easy, that is, take the path of least resistance and simply grow, instead of doing what is right, which is directing our surplus towards a more prosperous future. So there it is, key concept number 2, growth does not equal prosperity. Now that you have these two in hand, we're ready to explore this thing called money.